Welcome to episode 10 of Digital Innovation Talks. I'm going to be your host, and my name is Gideon Brefo, the CEO of Hapa Space Collaborative Hub in Ghana. We support early stage startups with co working space and business support services. Thinking about digital innovation talks is the theme of our AfriConEU Vidcast series. For those who are wondering what Vidcast is, it's simply a podcast that contains video content. So the series includes 12 monthly episodes that started in April 2022, and each episode explores a different topic that is related to EU Africa Digital Innovation Hubs and startup ecosystem. For those who are watching us for the first time, African EU is a project that aspires to create the first Trans-Continental Networking Academy to support African and European digital innovation hubs in capacity building, knowledge sharing, networking, collaboration, joint projects, and venture development. In fact, the project has received funding from European Union's Horizon 2020 Research and Innovation Program and is being implemented since February 2021 and going until January 2024. It involves 4 African partners and 7 European partners. So let's start this episode 10. The topic of our episode today is cultivating inclusive innovation ecosystems. Let me introduce to you our guest for today, Dr. Eleanor T. Khonje, a founder and CEO of ETK Leadership Solutions and a professor at Business School Lausanne. Welcome, Eleanor.
Thank you
Please tell
so
us
much.
more about you and ETK Leadership Solutions.
Thank you so much, Gideon. Thank you. I'm super excited to be here and very grateful to the organizers for this series. I think these are much needed conversations, especially if we're going to cultivate and create innovation systems that are sustainable, that are going to last for a very long time, and that are also very transformative. So I'm excited to definitely be sharing my own perspectives. And Gideon, I hope this can be a conversation as you are a practitioner, right? You're a practitioner. I'm a theorist who does a little bit of practice as well. So I hope that when we talk about these inclusive systems today, we can be a little bit of an exchange, because I would also love to hear your thoughts on some of what we're going to be talking about today. But yes, like Gideon said, my name is Dr. Eleanor Khonje, and I am the CEO and founder of ETK Leadership Solutions. And ETK Leadership Solutions is a leadership and communication firm that looks to build leaders who walk authentically in the totality of who they desire and dare and were meant to be. And for me, the totality of a person and the totality of an organization is extremely important, because it's the idea of understanding that we're multifaceted, that we're extremely dynamic, and that we require the knowledge and the tools needed for us to rise to the occasion of who we are and do the best that we can in impacting our world. So we do this work through individuals, we do this work through organizations as well, and also helping organizations rise to the occasion of who they are, making sure that they can really make the kind of impact that they want to make as the private sector, as the public sector, as a university, and so on and so forth. And yes, I am also a professor at the Business School Lausanne. Teaching is my heart and my soul. It is a space that really challenges me, that makes me consider how impactful the conversation in the classroom needs to be, because we're really training future business leaders. So a lot of the conversations that I have with my students are this: how do we actually create a world that is a lot more inclusive? How do we consider notions of gender and other notions of inclusivity when we're cultivating businesses, when we're creating ecosystems that are actually sustainable? So yes, teaching at the university, at Business School Lausanne in particular, has been just a way that I feed my intellectual self, that I feed my own person, and it's a joy to have that space to express myself as well. So that is me in a package.
And we are definitely grateful to have you. You are
you.
actually the go-to person on this.
Am I?
So yes, yes, definitely. Over the weeks, we also got in touch with our community and followers and
Hmm,
collected some questions for you today.
absolutely.
Um, and definitely looking forward to hearing your perspective on those questions. So, just to begin with, the first question says, what does it mean to cultivate inclusive ecosystems?
What does it mean to cultivate inclusive ecosystems? For me, in a day and age right now where we're having a lot more conversations about diversity, equity, and inclusion, the heart of really cultivating inclusive ecosystem is ensuring that we have a conversation with ourselves as business owners, as business practitioners, as leaders of startups, however it is that you define where you work, that we're very intentional in understanding that the world of work is a world that is extremely complex. Therefore, if we're really going to offer our services and products to the community in a way that actually meets the needs of society, there is an intentional conversation that we have to have with ourselves as leaders, and that what we have to have amongst our teams as well. And it's a conversation about how do we actually leverage the expertise of different types of people who are working with us? How do we ensure that we create space where different ideas are accepted? Because inclusive ecosystems are not just about inclusive people, meaning I'm not just talking about gender, I'm not just talking about culture, I'm not just talking about religion. I'm also talking about the inclusiveness of ideas, really creating a world in our place of work that allows us to create a safe space for people to share ideas that can allow us to actually meet whatever needs that we have to meet in society. So for me, absolutely, as a sociologist, I approach it fundamentally from a gender perspective, gender diversity and inclusion perspective. But like I said, inclusive ecosystems also look to inclusive, creating a space where inclusive ideas are welcomed.
Very good. So, bringing everything together, people, systems that will make the workplace a safe place, ecosystem a safe
Absolutely,
place for everybody to work.
absolutely.
Thank you so much.
Ideas. Absolutely, absolutely, absolutely.
So, in that sense, what needs to be considered if we want to cultivate inclusive innovation ecosystems?
There are quite a number of things that when we're having this conversation in the classroom, and we're looking at the different methodologies that can be applied to develop diversity and inclusion structures that are inclusive, there are quite a number of things that have to always be on the table. One, you have to look at socially, where is the business embedded? Culturally, where is the business embedded? Politically as well, and as well as economically. There are a lot of conversations and a lot of layers that have to be unpacked if you are truly going to cultivate an inclusive ecosystem. So for me, one of the points that I like to make is, for example, a lot of companies are very much aware of corporate social responsibility, right? They're aware of the fact that within their governance structure, they have to be responsible in the ways that they produce products, in the ways that they offer services. But I like to challenge that to say that beyond corporate social responsibility, at the very core of your business structure, how can you shape the everyday business that you do in a way that is inclusive, in a way that is thinking about people, in a way that is thinking about gender, in a way that is thinking about age, in a way that is thinking about different tenets of diversity that allow your workers, the people employed in your company, to, yes, to feel included, but that also allow the community in which you're operating to know that there's a business here that holds itself up to much higher standards. So for me, when you're considering the cultivation of inclusive ecosystems, it's really, again, understanding the many layers that are there: social, cultural, political, economic, understanding that it's not a one size fits all solution as well. So if you're going to come up with a methodology and a structure and a strategy on gender diversity, equity, and inclusion, for example, is just not a matter of plucking something that you've seen somewhere else done, but it's really a matter of understanding what are the needs of your organization based on where you are. So, Gideon, using you as an example, living in Ghana, right? The way that you're going to think about diversity is going to be very different than the
Yeah.
company that I run, which is right here in Switzerland, right? So the notions of diversity that you're going to have to consider are not going to be the same notions of diversity that I'm going to have to consider. You have to look at the structure in which your company is embedded. You have to look at the context in which you're operating, the industry. What are the ideas associated about who's supposed to be working in that industry? Is it a feminization of that kind of labor, right? So if you're working in the industry of machinization, for example, is it only men that are being employed in that context? How can you challenge those norms to say that no, women shouldn't just be employed in care work or in what people consider soft labor, but that they can actually be a part of this mechanization industry? So what are the ideas in the context in which you're embedded that are informing how you approach this notion of inclusivity? That is extremely important.
Thank you so much. And I think this is very important because now we are talking about internationalization of people's innovation. So if you
Absolutely.
are moving from EU to Africa and you don't consider the context, the
Absolutely.
social context, the cultural context, then
Absolutely.
the
Absolutely.
move has
Absolutely.
already failed.
Absolutely. I mean, for me, one of the examples, I mean, I know there's a lot to share on this. One of the examples I always use is even when we talk about the conversation about race. In a context
Mhm.
like Europe, I can have that conversation for sure and look at how racial representation is configured within my own company, as an example. But when I move to a company in India, when I move to a company in Malawi or in Kenya, that conversation is going to be very different. I have to look at other tenets, not necessarily race, because that's not going to be something to talk about in that context. But there are other issues that we're going to have to consider when we talk about diversity from context to context. So it's an issue that everybody has to consider across the world, but it's a very context specific issue based on political systems, social systems, economic systems, and so on and so forth.
Thank you so much. Now, flowing from that, if there is a startup that has never considered the challenge of gender diversity and inclusion, where should that person start off from if the person wants to become inclusive?
No, it has to start from the very foundation of your business modeling. For me, that's the best place. I think it's fantastic, like I said earlier, that we have corporate social responsibility arms that are embedded in organizations. But for me, the challenge always is, what if we already at the very foundation of our companies think about these issues? Therefore, from a business modeling perspective, how can you already consider how gender diversity and inclusion conversations can be an embedded part of who you're hiring, who you're onboarding, the kinds of conversations that you're having with the people that you onboard? So instead of building business of structuring your company and using your traditional business models where these notions are already not an embedded part of it, my challenge always is include this conversation at the very beginning of your startup. Don't wait until you make enough capital to start thinking about this. No, already at the very beginning of your startup, or even if you're a couple months in or a couple years in, already bring that conversation and see how it can be an embedded part of how you work, how you hire. That way, it's not something that's done as a checklist, but it's something that's already a part of your culture. Therefore, when you're raising the leaders in your organization, you're raising the kind of leaders who already consider these issues as an embedded part of how you work, irrespective of whether you're working in a context that deals with equality or diversity. No, any company can include these issues as an embedded part of what they do.
Thank you so much. And while we do this, how does this contribute to national development?
Oh my goodness, the issue of inclusivity. Imagine a world in which every single person, irrespective of what they look like, where they come from, if they feel as if they are embedded in institutions that care about them, where they're valued, where they're seen as individuals who have something to offer at the table, where they're not seen as just come and be a worker and go home, but that your ideas actually matter. For me, that's really the heart of what I emphasize even through ETK Leadership Solutions is people are an embedded part of national development. National development is feeds its energy from the work that business practitioners do, from the work that government does as well. So for me, it's when you care about the people within your organizations, when you create space for them at the table to bring their ideas, to bring their strengths, their capacities, to bring who they are. And they know that when I walk into an organization, I'm not limited by my gender. I'm not limited by my race. I'm not limited by the ethnic group that I come from. When they know that their ideas and their ability to work and be a part of advancing this vision for the company is what matters, of course, it's going to have a direct impact on national development because every company that's working out there is going to be doing its part. If I do my part with my small little company and I ensure that my people are taken care of and we're able to then maximize our profit potential, that directly impacts national development. But if you don't care about your people, you're not creating inclusive spaces for your people, you're not having critical conversations about what inclusivity means in the context in which you're embedded, then there's no way that's going to translate to national development. So for me, national development is waiting on us as business practitioners, as business leaders, to actually do our part in ensuring that the spaces that we're creating, where we're doing business, are actually done in such a way that our people are showing up in the best of who they are, because it has a direct translation to what happens at the national context.
Thank you so much. A lot of nuggets in there for those of us who are on the ground practicing these and building businesses. But now, what are these inclusive behaviors that need to be promoted at the workplace if we want to achieve this?
Absolutely. For me, it comes down to many different layers, right? At the first, if we're talking about inclusivity when it comes to hiring processes, for example, blind CVs. This is something that I talk a lot about, and this is something that I advocate, because at the end of the day, if we're all biased, right? Because again, the conversation about inclusivity comes from the acknowledgement that we all carry certain levels of biases that are informed by the ways in which we were socialized. And that bias is just not a bias against other people, it can also be a bias against ourselves and what we think we're capable of doing based on our gender, based on our race, based on our nationality, where we come from, and so on and so forth. So for me, at the very onset, a practice like blind CVs, blind hiring, meaning there's no need for me to know the gender of the person that I'm hiring, their nationality, their age. The only thing that I need to know is the terms of reference that I have on the table, the kind of person that I'm looking for. And then when I see the CV, be able to just base it 100% on whether this person is capable of working in a way that allows me to advance my business objectives or not. So for me, that is an extremely, extremely important practice that I would advocate for as many corporations to take on board as possible. This notion of blind CVs. Another one is strategic planning. Strategic planning. So ensuring, like I said earlier, that inclusive notions, inclusive language as well, inclusive methods in how you work are an embedded part of your institutional behavior. Ensuring that training, when you do training, it's not just about sensitization, but this trainings on bias are actually an embedded part of what you do as an organization. It's not a one-time thing. These conversations are something that everyone is used to having. You create spaces where as an organization, you're having those tough conversations. Do people feel at home here? Do the women in our workplace feel as if we've created a space for them to rise? How are promotions being done? What are the fair processes that have been put in place for promotions to actually be done? Negotiation processes themselves as well, because the negotiation process is very gendered. So when people are getting promotions or are being hired, how are we offering them salaries? What is the gender pay gap looking like in the context in which we're working? What are the measures that we can put in place as an organization to actually address that gender pay gap when we're hiring? Blind CV, but let's say the person who comes in is a woman. What kind of offer are we giving this person? Is it fair? Is it reflective of industry standards? Are the industry standards also gendered or not? So really having very critical conversations amongst yourselves, hiring boards, leaders of organizations that look at the many layers of how you work on a daily basis. Employee resource groups as well are so important. Empowering your employees by enabling them to create employee resource groups. Because within those employee resource groups, they'll be able to address issues that the larger arm of human resources might not be able to address. They'll be able to come up with groups that enable them to empower each other, create safe spaces amongst themselves where they can address much larger issues. So these types of inclusive behaviors are really informed by leadership for sure, but then also in the everyday behavior on how work is done, on how work is negotiated, on how hiring processes themselves are also done. So I mentioned quite a number of things, but I hope that was able
Yes.
to.
And they are all very practical and useful. I'm learning a lot from that, because I think that in terms of harnessing the abilities of the individual staff
Absolutely.
and including them, I had a first-hand experience when we
Mhm,
started bringing all the staff together whenever we are about starting a project and
mhm,
seeking their feedback and
mhm.
getting the ideas embedded. It
Absolutely.
really shot up productivity because they felt
Absolutely.
part of it.
Absolutely. That's it. That's it. That's the secret. Make your few people feel cared about. Make them feel. I was just having a conversation with some of my team members last night, and I was talking to them about the notion of empowering leadership, right? Because inclusivity is embedded in that. If you're going to utilize an empowering leadership framework, then the heart of it is going to be this notion of inclusivity, making sure that people are heard, making sure that people are seen, making sure that their ideas are appreciated when they are brought to the table.
Thank you so much for sharing those beautiful points with us. I think we might have to get another chance to discuss this
I
further.
think so too.
So
I
at
think
this point, I just want to pause here and ask you, is there any last kind of information you want to share with viewers concerning inclusive ecosystems?
I mean, I'm just really happy that we're having this conversation a lot more. And one of the things that I want to say to everyone who's watching this is that when we talk about gender diversity, equity, and inclusion within business, let's just not talk about it from a mainstreaming perspective and a greenwashing perspective. Let's actually really consider the fact that these issues are critical to creating sustainable innovation systems. So it shouldn't just be that we're doing this because we want to be able to say to other people, to our board of directors, that yes, 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 we've had a training. We'll do a training once a quarter. No, but these are actually this your people are what make your organization impactful. It's what's going to allow you to be able to meet whatever objectives that you might have, to be able to unfold that vision that you have. Therefore, when it comes to addressing these issues matter more than whatever bottom line that you have to meet. Because when you address these issues and people actually feel as if their ideas matter, exactly what Gideon illustrated earlier, your productivity is going to go up. People are going to show up to work with a lot more energy, with a lot more excitement, because they feel that the organization that they're serving, that they are a part of, really cares about who they are, really cares about their well-being. We're talking a lot about well-being these days, and it's up to us as leaders of organizations to really create spaces where our people are truly well, where people are cared for, where they're included, where their ideas are really incorporated because they matter. People matter more than anything else. Therefore, our investment should really be in our people through this notion of creating inclusive ecosystems.
Thank you so much, Eleanor, for sharing this with us. We are grateful that you joined us today. So, viewers, that was episode 10 of Digital Innovation Talks, the African EU Vidcast series. Thanks so much for watching. Do not forget to subscribe to our YouTube channels, follow us on social media, and stay up to date. Stay tuned for the next episode.
Bye, everyone.